Okay, so welcome Fee to Seesaw. Welcome to the podcast again. The weather's getting a little bit warmer. It's a bit sunnier outside, but you're still finding yourself drawn to the windowless rooms of photographic exhibitions.
Hi, Grant. I am, but also I have to say there's quite a lot of in and out of photographic exhibitions this month. It's not all behind closed and locked doors. Good, although some of it is in a cellar, so there's that too.
Well, that's always nice and cool on a warm day.
Well, that's true as well. So I got three things I thought we should talk about today. One is a fascinating exhibition that I just loved, and I'm going to go back to several times, which is on until the end of the summer. One is an exhibition that has got a lot of thumbs up, very good reviews, which is very interesting, which is also on until July, I think. And then the other, so those are the two C exhibitions. And then there's a SAW exhibition, which is Photo London, which will be over by the time the podcast comes out. But there's a lot to talk about. And I think it's really worthwhile on many levels, not least because people can think about booking it for next year.
Or not,
Or not,
as the case may be. But
as the case may be.
we'll go on to that. I was talking to photographer Harry Borden the other day, and he said that I was fearless. So maybe I will be fearless in my discussion around Photo London. Let's see. Which one do you want to kick off with?
I'll tell you what, let's start with the power and the glory at Newport Street Gallery. Okay, so Newport Street Gallery is in South London. It's sort of Vauxhall area, and it is a gallery owned by Damien Hirst. It's
That's
actually,
a bit of where has that come out of left field? I wasn't aware that he owned a gallery down there.
yeah, he's had it. I think it's about 2010 or thereabouts. It's been going for a while.
Okay.
Um, and it's a beautiful space. I mean, it's a really beautiful place. You had to kind of hunt around to find it because it's kind of in the middle of a housing estate next to the overground. Um, but
Is it
it,
far from the bus station? Is it that kind of area we're talking about?
I'm trying to remember where do I usually Lambeth North.
Lambeth North. Okay.
Yeah, there you go. When I go down there, I go to Lambeth North, and then I walk back up to the river and cross the river and get the tube from Westminster, Victoria. So it's around that area.
Okay. Well, that's useful for everybody living near London.
Exactly. Anyway, it's a beautiful gallery. They usually have a couple of exhibitions on at the same time. They have a really, really nice cafe restaurant as well, which sometimes does free tea and coffee, which is very nice to know. And the staff there are very nice as well. And it's worth checking out if you happen to be around South London for many different reasons. Also, they sell some nice books and things. And it's very off the beaten track in terms of coverage. People don't talk about it that much. But this exhibition, so there are two exhibitions on at the moment. On the ground floor, there's a mixed media sculpture painting group show, which is fine. But then you go upstairs, and this thing, the power and the glory. Okay, so I uh, well, it's exhibition. It's photographs of nuclear explosions, of atom bombs being detonated. And I wasn't entirely sure what to expect. I thought, okay, maybe there'll be, you look on the website and there's literally like four or five pictures. But you go in and there are, how many pictures are there? There are loads and loads of pictures. There are three huge rooms, and all around the walls there are photographs. And the photographs come from the U.S. Army, from that there are things including Trinity, the device that was exploded, at the Oppenheimer device. There are images from Nagasaki and Hiroshima. There are images of Bikini Atoll. Basically, there are a couple hundred images of atomic explosions, all from the time. And um, these are around the walls, as I say. And in the middle of the rooms, there is an exhibition of scholars' stones. Now, scholars' stones they're a natural phenomenon. They are rocks that have been collected in China for hundreds, perhaps thousands of years. And it's very strange combination, but incredibly powerful combination because you walk in and you can look at one or other and then you can go back and forth. And my first sort of feeling was that the shapes of these stones and rocks is almost echoed in the shapes of the huge, the mushroom clouds and so on. So you have that kind of dialogue visually, and it's also sort of about how humankind has treated nature, how we use the beauty of nature to make something as destructive as this. And first of all sort of walked in and I thought there's a vibe in here. It almost feels like you're being made to feel guilty by these beautiful pieces of natural rock. But then by the time you're into the third room, they're almost there to solace and comfort you. It's a very visceral exhibition, and it's very beautifully presented. It's a beautiful, clean space. And the information underneath the images is literally just the photographer's name, if there is one, the place, the date, the time, the exact location, maybe a little bit more information than that. But because so much of what they were doing was documenting the explosions as they happened, it's literally seconds, nanoseconds of dust and debris going up into the atmosphere and falling down on the ground. And it's just incredibly powerful stuff.
It sounds as if it's being curated by one person. Am I right? Did you know who that was?
It's officially been curated by one person who's Connor Hurst, who happens to be Damon Hirst's son. But the images all come from, they're all in the public domain. They're all property of the US Air Force, and they, they, you can get hold of them comparatively easily, but then you have to get them together, put them into a book, put them onto the wall, frame them, and so on and so forth. And yeah, and so it tells this incredibly powerful story, and there's very little other documentation about it. There's a very nice book with a short essay, a little bit of background about it, a little bit more information about what's happening in each image, and that's it. And then you just walk around.
Hmm. It sounds to me as if it's an experience within the space, but it's very, oh, it's always difficult. My back always goes up when I hear that it's the artist's son has been given the opportunity to do this. Do you know what I'm saying?
I do know what you're saying, but that's perhaps why I didn't lead with that information, because I don't think that that's relevant in this case. I don't think it should influence the way one feels about these images. What for me is one of the things that's most interesting about this is another example of what photography is for and what photography exhibitions are for. It's showing you something that you definitely don't see every day and don't think to look at every day, and which does exist in books, obviously, and online and so on and so forth. But there is something about walking into this space and seeing, as I say, nearly a couple of hundred images of explosions. It just touches you in a different
It's
way.
very visceral, isn't it? I mean, because we know the reality of that explosion. It's all very well to see it from the sky, but the reality of seeing it at ground level would be very, very different.
And what it does is there aren't actually a couple of hundred explosions. There are fewer explosions than that, but there are images, different images from different angles, and by different people, of the same thing. So, for instance, with the bomb that was dropped on Nagasaki, you go into a bit of the room and you walk along, and there's sort of like one image, two images, three images, four images, five, and it goes through. There's about 10 of them of the bomb of the beautiful cloud, bright sky, bit of cloud in it, and this thing blossoming in the sky, seen from slightly different angles of the plane, and and then the next thing is the ground, and you see pictures of the devastation on the ground. Not tons of pictures of the devastation, but a couple of really, really strong details. Like one of the people who's there is Bernard Hoffman, who was a photographer who went on the ground later to Nagasaki and just took pictures of the devastation, destruction, and there's a Japanese photographer who also was doing that, and it's just very profound in so many ways, as it should be.
It seems to me as if it's a very topographic approach to the photography. I instantly think of the Beckers and the electricity pylons, or, there's that kind
Yeah.
of. I wonder if it would have the same impact if the stones element hadn't been put in, whether or not the stones are sort of taking on a different place.
Well, I mean,
Well, if you were
uh,
only looking at the repetition of the photograph, would it have had the same
yeah.
impact as the fact of seeing these stones in the middle of the room? Is that is actually the exhibition, I should say, the juxtaposition of those two things? Because I'm talking a lot, of thinking a lot about at the moment, and I think we've discussed it, that idea that a photographic exhibition doesn't only have to have photographs. And if it had only had photographs, would it have been as powerful?
Um, I think it would have been different. I think it would have been different. I think that the in this particular instance, because the stones are so very different, so unexpected. So they're not like it's not like, for instance, seeing videos or seeing art installations or so on. It's a piece of nature next to these images of destruction in, of, by, with nature. And so you could walk around the whole thing with your backs to the stones. But like I say, by the time I got to the third room, I felt I needed comfort or solace or something, which they seem to provide. And I mean, we all read we all read our own reactions and responses into looking at exhibitions and so on. But I felt it was a very good way of seeing this. But I still think that even without the stones, the images themselves are so powerful, but partly because you've seen so many of them, partly because they are scientific works. They're not pieces of art. The none of the named photographers was doing it in order to make a great picture. They were literally being paid by the US Army
Mm.
to document what's going on.
So it's found imagery, it's documentation, bringing it together to tell a different story.
It is. It is. It very, very much is. And that's why I say it's I'm looking, I've got pictures over here and I've got pictures over here, and I'm just checking if there was something else I wanted to add to this. It's exactly that. It's image found images telling a story, and there's a lot of different kinds of found images. You have different, slightly different framed versions of some of the explosions. There's a wire press photo. There's a radio photo. There's this kind of thing. So it's interesting on many levels from the technical point of view, from the deeply philosophical point of view. And I hate to say it, but they're beautiful pictures too.
Mm. Okay, so that's something a little bit different to kick us off this
It
month.
is. It's really different. And honestly, I'm going to go back and it's free. And it's on until the end of the summer. I think it's on until September. I'd have to double check that. I should have my notes with me. But yeah, it's really good. I really recommend it. I'm definitely going back to it again.
Well, as a born and bred South Londoner, I can do nothing more than promote anything that happens in South London. So that's
Okay.
good.
All
So what
right.
else?
So
What else did you see?
So moving on a little bit more South London. But this is not South London, the place. This is South London, South Londoner. Okay, so this next exhibition is Gabriel Moses' Cellar, which is on at the moment in 180 The Strand. So the Strand, 180 The Strand is this very trendy building on the Strand. Nearest tube would probably be Aldwych or Holborn,
Or
down on the
Charing Cross
or
on
Charing
the
Cross
train.
if you
Yeah.
walk up. Yeah. And so Gabriel, do you know anything about Gabriel Moses?
Well, not a lot, but I'm aware of the
A little bit.
name and I'm
Yeah.
aware of the fashion work kind of. But I find him quite a sort of a mysterious character, really. It seems to me to be a kind of a way of working which comes out of a new way of seeing fashion work, where you're kind of almost like a kind of a group or a brand or something like that. It reminds me of that. I can't remember his name. There was an Italian photographer in the 90s who set up a big design group and fashion kind of brand in Milan, Industria or something like that. I can't remember. But it seems to be a similar kind of a mindset that you're not just a photographer, you can do everything. Am I right?
A little bit. Yeah, I think there's definitely a bit of that in it. So, for the sort of background, general background for the readers, for listeners, the audience, um, Gabriel Moses is all of 26 or 27 years old. He was born in 1998. He's ridiculously young. He's from South London. His background is he's British, but his background is Nigerian. And he studied business and marketing, I think. He didn't study photography, but his older sister was into fashion and she would do the classic old thing of having fashion magazines and tearing pages out of the fashion magazines and plastering them on her wall. And he would look at these and he says is how he got interested in image making and photography and fashion because he looked at those pictures his sister was tearing out. And when he was in the late teens, he was making videos of his friends playing football, posting them on YouTube. And Nike saw these videos and commissioned him. So he was literally being commissioned, self-taught at 18 years old to start shooting for the biggest sports brand around. Um, and that could probably have gone very horribly wrong, but actually he seems to have manage that incredibly well. And like you say, it is a bit of a sort of like bringing together almost a collective. It's not quite a collective, but he does place a lot of importance on the people he works with, his friends and his family and his mother and this kind of thing. So he's gone through for the last few years now developing a body of work, both still photography and video. There are music videos. For this exhibition, 180 Studios commissioned him to make a half-hour film, a narrative film, which is very good, except I couldn't actually sit through the whole thing because it's a bit too close to the screen and I was getting a headachy, but the bits I saw are great. So what you do is you go to 180 Studios and you go down the steps into the basement, and the basement is very dark, and the walls are sort of destroyed, and the floor and the ceiling are kind of like it's like an old car park kind of an area. And he fills the space incredibly well. There's sort of like four or five rooms, I think, and his work is pretty big. So the still images are sort of like a meter wide by 80 centimeters high, that kind of thing. Um, and there are many of them. And there are projections of videos, some a little smaller, some a little bigger, but it really fills the space, which is quite incredible for somebody so young to have this amount of work that is this consistent.
Yeah, but when you're doing
And
big prints, fill big spaces.
yes, and lots of big prints.
Mm.
By the way, there are also a few bits of sculpture and things in this, but it doesn't have the same resonance for me as the Scholar Stones in the Power and the Glory. Um, his style of photography is very saturated color,
Mm.
um, very minimal use of light on faces and parts of bodies. So you rarely see somebody's whole face. You see really strong highlights here and there. A lot of symbolism and iconography using flags, using really solid colored backgrounds. Um, Quite sort of simple monumental compositions of things. Um, very kind of minimalist, but with a maximalist color sensibility. Um, And I walked around it thinking it's very music video-ish, and there are music videos. But after I'd gone around a couple of times, I thought it is just amazing to have so developed a vision. Um, again, I can come back to his age, this kind of thing. And it's getting really, really rave reviews. I mean, and the thing is, this is the second time. There's 70 images in this. He was also exhibited in 180 The Strand 2 years ago, and he had 50 images in it, and I think they're mostly different. So he's getting a lot of love online from a lot of outlets, and he's still doing tons of work with fashion brands and so on.
I get it. I think it's interesting. I didn't know he had that marketing background, but that to me makes complete sense because it does feel to me rather manipulative in the way in which it's all set up. It feels to me as if there is a marketing understanding there, which obviously there is, and there's a business. It's a business type thing, and that's why I was giving the example of that photographer who did the thing in Italy in the 90s, which then became a clothing label. I get that, but
Was that Olivia Toscani?
sorry?
Was that Olivia Toscani?
No, it wasn't Toscani. It was someone else. And it's on the tip of my tongue. And by the end of the episode, I'm gonna remember it. But I'm sure it became Industria, which was a
Yeah,
building and a studio space, and they started to make films, but it was set up by a photographer
yeah.
and whose name is on the tip of my tongue. But I'm sure you
Okay.
would know
All
as
right.
well. But
Listeners, by the time we get to the end of this, you can have Googled it.
yeah, exactly. Exactly. I want to say it's Gianni, someone, but I can't remember. Anyway, the problem I have with the work is this. I think it is very, very much of the moment, and
Mhm.
I don't see anything in it that's going to
Mm.
be easily evolved or developed into a visual language. It seems to me a little bit candy floss in that it's a nice idea
Yeah,
and it looks great, but
yeah.
actually there's not a lot of nutritional value.
I think the things I'm trying to be keep a very open mind about it, and think about it. And I did read quite a lot of the reviews about him and interviews with him. He comes across as an extremely what's the word that I'm not being able to say? He can express himself very well.
Hmm.
He's a thoughtful person.
I think
He's
he's a player. I think he gets the industry, and I think there's a lot to learn for a lot of photographers from that
yeah,
approach who might look at the work
yeah,
and
absolutely.
dismiss it. But actually, I think he's probably understanding where photography in the professional commissioned area is going.
Very, very probably very, very true. I mean, and going back to what you're saying earlier about, being part of working with others and so on, this is obviously really, really key for the development of his practice. And for anyone who wants to work in the creative industries, in fashion in particular, you've got to be able to see where it's going. You've got to be able to see where your work fits into that, and you've got to be able to collaborate with people. So as I say, I wandered around and a little bit, I slightly felt, I think I've seen quite a lot of this um, in the past, but then, I'm old enough to be his grandmother practically, not let alone his mother. So you can't sort of go, well, you can't expect everyone to have seen everything and then to have found the one thing no one else has done. What's impressive here is the consistency. But I totally take your point that it is it works as a marketing as well as art expression. People, I would recommend going along to see it. It's not cheap. It's £20 to go and see this.
Wow, well, there you go. There's my point proven in one fell swoop. Who the hell is going to pay £20 to see that work? I don't get it. Well, you
Obviously,
did, obviously.
well, I did because I love photography, and also because I mean it balances out. You pay nothing to go and see Damien Hirst's exhibition, which is
Yeah.
fabulous. and then 20 quid to go and support a young photographer who, quite frankly, has already been very well supported by Nike and Adidas and all the rest of it.
Yeah, I'm going to say he doesn't necessarily need your financial support. We're not talking about a photographer here who I think is on his uppers.
True, true with all of those things, but nonetheless, I'm not going to go back to it. But I think it's worthwhile, and I think it's worthwhile for all the things we've just been saying about as a study and somebody who wasn't is self-taught and picked obviously very intelligently and very shrewdly from the influences that were around him and has developed a practice very shrewdly as well
Yeah.
and is getting a lot of really terrific traction from it. So it's a very interesting, it's very interesting.
I think it's well worth people looking him up, doing some reading, trying to work out what he's doing and how he's doing it so successfully. But I'll put a little bit of money down here that he won't be a photographer for very much longer, and that he will either have a clothing brand, a creative agency of some kind, and he's going to move into that work. That would just what I'm saying. I'm always happy to be proven wrong.
We shall see.
We shall
I'm
see.
not taking money.
Right now,
I think we'll see. Right.
my cynicism has been revved up by that. And
All
now
right.
we move to the perfect location for my cynicism, which is Photo London.
London. Oh, goodness me. Oh, right. Photo London. Many pages of notes about Photo London, and still it didn't get that. Okay, so first of all, Photo London, for anybody who doesn't know, is a big, big, big uh, photography fair. It's in its 10th year. It's only 10 years old. Parry Photo has been going for an awful lot longer. And it's on in Somerset House down on the embankment again. And it's opened to the public on Thursday, and Sunday is its last day. So it's only on for 4 days open to the public. There's a preview day on the Wednesday. Um, Again, tickets here are not cheap. I think it's £30 or thereabouts for a day. I was lucky enough to have a pass. Thank you. So I was able to go several times, which honestly I had to because there's just so much to see. It's just massive. There is a ton of stuff. So if you remember when we were talking about the World Photography Awards, the Sony World Photography Awards, which are also in Somerset House,
Yeah.
and I think we were talking about that last month or whatever, and I was I was complaining about the venue and about the way that the material was hung, and I was complaining about the way it was displayed because I just thought it was impossible to see in there. However, same venue, much, much better result. You can see things much more easily because, of course, it's full of gallerists and professional gallery owners know how to display their work in a space to make it look terrific. Um, and how many galleries were displaying? I couldn't tell you, but I have a long list here. Uh, it's a very, very, very long list, which is online, obviously. There are big rooms, there are little rooms. There is the big tent in the courtyard, which has got sort of booths. You go out the back, and there's more stuff going on the embankment side. There are publishers. There are down in the basement there. There are all kinds of up and coming photographers. There are curated sections and so on. There's just a ton of stuff. And like I say, I think I went back 4 days and just about managed to see everything, I think. Um, what can I tell you? What would you like to know?
Well, here's the thing. I remember going to the first year. So I know with all of these things, I think I've been about two or three times over the years. And it's a lovely environment. It's a great building. It's a great space. It's very nice to have a glass of wine on the embankment and meet up with old friends and so forth. I think it's a great opportunity for us in the UK to meet a lot of photographers, get them to sign books and all of that kind of thing. The slight issue I've had with it, and before this conversation, I did do some research. I never do much research, but I thought you'd be talking about Photo London, so I asked a few others, primarily photographers who'd been to see it. And what their feeling was is what my feeling is about it, which is there is always a difficult friction when the commercial gallery side meets photography as to what they show, as to is it interesting, is it engaging, or is it there to be sold to investment bankers and anybody else who can afford the print? Because as you know, it's a lot of it is greatest hits. You know, it's Cartier-Bresson, it's Lee Miller, it's all those photographers you expect to see. And for a lot of people, that's great if it's their first time of seeing it. But I just feel that it could be much more inclusive of the photographic community outside of a very narrow understanding of what that photographic community is. And I think even at 30 quid to get in, well, that's a lot of money in today's economic climate. And it's a lot of money for a photographer because it's fine for you to get, no offense, but it's fine for you to get the tube cross town and go. But if
Exactly.
I but if I was to come up from the rural idyll where I live, I'm paying trains, I've got to pay hotel accommodation. So it's
Of
starting
course.
to be a big, big investment. And I just wish it was friendlier toward less corporate. But
Yeah.
that's me having a little bit of a moan. What do you think?
Well, the thing is that I completely take your points about it is a big deal to go for anyone. And before, I would have, again, I would have paid money for my ticket. I have paid money for my ticket in the past, but I wouldn't pay for going 4 days in a row because I couldn't afford it. I even to get the weekend pass, which is 50 or something quid, I would struggle to justify that. Um, and I think a lot of in fact, most of the people who I know who went were going with friends, or they were going with their gallerists, or their friends who had galleries, or their friends who had worked in the exhibitions or work that was shown, and therefore they were able to come along for an event or something. So there is that. I was, by the way, very pleased though to see a couple of our students there as well. So that was good. Um, but it is a shame that you can't get in for like a tenner. There is a late afternoon pass for something, but it I know what you mean. It becomes quite exclusive when it's that kind of pricing. It's the same thing as Freeze, Freeze Art Fair. It's very undemocratic when you really have to have, a benefactor of some kind, whether that's you're in full-time employment or whatever. Um, but I think what we have to keep in mind, in all, honesty, is that a lot of Photo London, like a lot of these events, is for people who can afford to collect. It is for galleries to show their work to new potential buyers. It is a commercial thing.
It
You
is a
can't say no.
commercial thing, but also, I think what we also have to recognize here is that Photo London is charging those galleries a lot of money for those spaces.
Yeah,
So from that perspective, they've got a revenue stream there.
yeah,
In addition, I am aware, because I do know people who
yeah,
run the galleries,
yeah.
that they don't often meet their costs, you
Yes,
know. So
I know. Yeah,
it starts to become this thing, well, I have to be seen to be at Photo London, but or
yeah.
at a Paris Photo the same. But at the same time, those amounts of collectors are,
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
it's a dwindling market.
Exactly. And the thing is that also you can it's a bit of a kind of it's a bit of a lottery. It's in fact there's a lot of a lottery to whether you are going to get new buyers or whether you are going to attract a new audience and so on. And I think this is one of the reasons why the talks and the events and so on that it generates and the press coverage that it generates does actually make a big difference as well. Um, you have to have the whole circus has to come together in order for things to make it worthwhile for anyone. Certainly to make it worthwhile for the people who are stumping up the thousands of pounds to take a room or a booth there for a few days.
Yeah, but they don't want a bunch of students coming in, for example, and having a wander around. That they want to see a return on their investment, which isn't that kind of democratization. And I think that not this isn't really just about Photo London. I think this is a broader discussion because I'm always reminded. I was lucky enough to go to school in Wimbledon. And back in the 1970s, if you went to the when the tennis was on, you could walk down there, and on the way out, we used to say to people, "Can we have your ticket?" Because they would leave early. They'd
Yeah.
give us their ticket. We would go in for free as school kids, and they would have what they called free standing on centre court and whatever. And so you could stand there for free and watch. And I watched Borg and Connors and McEnroe. I saw all those players as a kid. And that was really exciting. Then they realized they could make money out of reselling those tickets. And suddenly the door was closed.
Hmm.
And I've always felt that there's a very similar issue with these kinds of events, in that I'm quite torn in that, I think they're really important, but I also feel that, like any art thing, like that guy charging 20 quid to see his work, I'm like, well, who do you think you are? Seriously. Why should I pay 20 quid to look at your work? I shouldn't. I think all art and all exhibitions should be free. Find the
Okay.
revenue streams
I
somewhere else.
I agree, but I would love if everything was free. I would still love a lot more things were free. Um, but we don't live in the socialist paradise yet.
Well, we
So
used to.
before,
We used to. We never used to have. I mean, we talk about this with exhibitions, don't we? That now you've got to book ahead of time. Have your time slot when you're going to go. Whereas you used to be able to just walk down the street and think, "Oh, I'll go in there and have a look." Now,
yeah,
I don't think we need to live in a socialist kind of.
paradise,
Yeah,
socialist paradise.
exactly. To actually go to that. Because if that guy wants to get lots of people to see his work, don't charge 20 quid. And the same thing with Photo London, put on more events for the independent photographic community. I know there's a couple of little involvements because there are people who I'm friends with who've contributed to the podcast who are involved in it. But it's in a very small way.
Okay, because before we spend the entire episode arguing about money, shall I tell you a few of the things that I actually came across over the last few days that I would
Yes.
can
Sorry.
tell what I actually like.
Yes.
Once you get over the hump about the money thing, I just wanted to tell a little bit about the things that work
Yeah.
about this as an experience. Okay, first of all, as you mentioned at the beginning, meeting friends. My gosh, it is good to actually you meet people. I kept running into people I haven't seen for 10 years, 20 years, and people I'd never met who were going, I know your name really well. So it is a great social event. It really genuinely is. Um, the books. You've got the publishers section, you've got an alternative book section where I spent my money on alternative book section. There's also a book market, which is tucked away on the embankment side, and it's kind of hard to find, but I found it, and it's a wonderful place as well with more international booksellers. And again, going back to the people, you just kind of wander around, and in the book market, I got into conversation with Edgar Martins, who is a Portuguese photographer, won the International Award for Sony World Photo 2 years ago. He did this book called Anton's Hand, which is about a friend of his who was kidnapped by Gaddafi, a journalist, was kidnapped by Gaddafi's troops and killed. And had a really long conversation with him telling me all about his work. And this is one of the great things. It's not just the talks and not just the public events. You can, as you say, go around, talk to people, meet astonishing people, and have some of their time. And that was really, really great. And then the kind of work, the range of work. Okay, yeah, if you have 42 grand to spend on a picture of Jean Shrimpton by Bailey, good for you. But there are things I had never seen before. So in the tent in the middle, uh, there's a gallery from Seoul, Korea, and they're showing the work of a Korean photographer, Lim Young-sik, who was called the godfather of Korean 20th century photography. And he was a war correspondent during the Korean War. And he photographed basically street photography in Seoul and Busan in the 1950s and 1960s, which I and everyone else who I know who saw that, we're all just like, that is really, really wonderful to see. And then back in the main building, there's just a lot of different interesting things. I love Bettina Pitalunga, French Uruguayan. She has a beautiful room with sort of intimate, semi-abstract portraits, very contemporary. Um, Downstairs again, David Hill Gallery. Must mention my local my local gallerist. They were showing Baldwin Lee pictures from and Baldwin Lee, the photographer, came over to give a talk and to be there for the event. And one of the really cool things, really crazy things, is Sandro Miller's pictures, his photography exhibition, his photography project he did with. He'd been doing, continuing, I guess, to do with John Malkovich. So this is a 10-year project where John Malkovich disguises him, dresses up as different famous photographs, and they do a shoot. So he's Meryl Streep in a white mask by Annie Leibovitz. He's the twins by Diane Arbus. He's the Bee Man by Christy Turlington. And again, had a really nice conversation with the gallerist there about that, who can talk you through what the story was, tell you about the book, show you all the extra stuff. So there's a lot of those kind of good gallery things, but then you go down into the basement, and the London Live section was great. Uh, Nick Turpin and Tom Hunter and Hannah Starkey and Alice Tomlinson, a lot of really and older people like James Barner, um, uh, uh, Kathy Knorr, a lot of people, Karen Knorr, a lot of really interesting people, and a lot of stuff that wasn't for sale, a lot of stuff that you could just look at, wander around, and see what's going on. So all of those things, I think, were great experiences, and that's why I would recommend people don't dismiss it simply because it was, don't dismiss it out of hand. There's a lot to look at and a lot of to experience and to talk about.
It sounds to me as if this year was pretty good as far as I'm always willing to be proved wrong. But I still do have a problem with the price, to be honest with you. I do. Um, and I'm sure, well, a little bit like photographic competitions, putting the funding of the event on the back of the people who can afford it least never sits well with me.
Mm,
And I think as a 10th anniversary, it would have been great to have Saturday that everyone can get in for £1. You know,
yeah,
just open it up. It's like football grounds when they say, kids come free or something like
yeah,
that. I think the more that we can do to promote and open the eyes of people to photography, the better. And you're describing work there that does sound really great and really interesting. Um, but if we put a fence
yeah,
around it, then what's
yeah.
the point?
Totally, totally, totally agree. And going back to your point about Gabriel Moses and 20 quid to admission for that exhibition,
Mm.
I think the fact is he doesn't need people to come and see that exhibition because you're going to see his work in magazines, in advertising and in music videos anyway. So for something like that, going to the exhibition is just a different experience. Whereas for something like Photo London, the sheer volume of stuff, the fact that you're seeing original prints, the little Cartier-Bresson prints of Matisse, to see those kind of things, to see work by Lewis Carroll from the 1840s, there's original photography from the dawn of photography being shown in real life is very special. And you
But it's also it's much better value. I mean, there's you can't question it's better value at 30 quid for that as opposed to 20 quid for some pictures in a cellar. But
exactly. But this is why also I sort of wanted to talk about, even though people would have to think about it for next year now. So everything you're saying about price and everything I'm feeling about the price is completely valid. Maybe Photo London will listen to the podcast and go, you know something, maybe we'll do a lottery or something. Maybe we'll do something, we'll just open it up for sort of 50 people to come
well,
free.
I think
That
they
would
should.
help.
Yeah, but you know what? It's Photo London. If you live in London and you can prove that you live in London, why not start there? If you've got an Oyster card, you get in. I just think that if we're going to grow photography as the understanding outside of a very small coterie of people, which is really where it's
Yeah.
at, because both you and I go to events and we meet lots of people we know. So,
Yes.
it's relatively a small world.
Yes.
And if we're going to try and get other people who don't ordinarily go to these things, then we need
Yeah.
to make it as easily accessible as possible, but also I think they need to,
Democratic.
yeah, democratic, inclusive, diversity, all of those things are really intrinsically important to all exhibitions, I think. Um, so it sounds as if it was great. I didn't go.
Absolutely.
Um, and I hope, as you say, that listen to this podcast. I doubt they will. But if they do, get in touch. Because we've got some ideas of how you can make it more friendly. I think that's what it needs to be. Once
Exactly.
once you get inside the tent, it seems okay. But outside of the
Once you get,
tent,
it's fab. It's really, really fab. There's a lot of amazing stuff. So it is worth, honestly, people, think about it for next year.
yeah. Okay. Well, listen, Fee, as always, it's been a rigorous uh, discussion. And I'm sure is there much more coming up as the summer comes on us, or are we starting to slow down?
There are a couple of things on my radar which are rather unusual, which I want to do in the next few weeks. And I'm not entirely sure if there are any biggies coming up before the autumn, but there are, as I say, a couple of interesting photography and photography adjacent excursions, put it like that, which might be interesting for people for summer things, summer holidays, doing stuff with kids, all that kind of stuff.
That sounds good to me. Okay, well, as always, it's been a pleasure and a joy. If you want to follow Fee's adventures, you can get her on Instagram. She is, not surprisingly, at the Art Dictator. And she's on all social media platforms as well, under the same pseudonym. I'm not sure if it's appropriate or not. You'll have to make your own decision. Thank you so much again, Fee.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you as always, Grant.
See you next month.